My name is Rose. I'm 72 years old, and I've lived my entire life on the same piece of land my husband and I built from nothing. We called it Willow Creek Farm because of the two old willow trees that stood by the pond. We raised our children there, worked the soil with our own hands, and watched the sun rise over the same hills every morning for 45 years. After my husband passed away 3 years ago, the farm became my whole world. I kept every corner the way he left it, his boots by the door, his hat on the peg, his tractor key still hanging on the hook. It made me feel like he was still around, somehow watching over me. But lately, that feeling has been replaced by something else, something colder, a tension that hangs in the air every time my daughter-in-law, Megan, steps through the gate. At first, I tried to welcome her. She was polite, too polite, maybe, always smiling, always calling me Mom, but there was something in her eyes, something sharp, calculating. She'd walk around the property, asking about the value of things, the barn, the land, the livestock, not out of curiosity, but interest. My son, Daniel, was always busy with work. He didn't see how Megan's tone changed when he wasn't around. She'd say things like, "Mom, this place must be so tiring for you. You should really move into town." Or, "Wouldn't it be better if you sold the farm? Think of how easy life could be." Every time, I'd smile and tell her that this land was more than dirt and fences. It was my life. It was my husband's dream. Then, one morning, Daniel came over, looking uneasy. He sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd fed him breakfast every day as a boy, and said, "Mom, Megan and I have been thinking, maybe it's time to make some changes around here." Changes. That word always means trouble. I folded my hands, looked at him, and waited. He cleared his throat. "You're getting older. You shouldn't have to worry about all this land anymore. Megan talked to a realtor. There's a buyer interested in the property." I felt my chest tighten. "Daniel," I said quietly, "this farm isn't just property." He sighed. "I know, Mom, but you can't live here alone forever. We could use the money to buy a nice house for all of us in the city." The city. He knew I'd never leave this place. Megan walked in just then, carrying a folder. She set it down in front of me and smiled that thin, perfect smile. Inside was a contract, all neat and printed, ready for my signature. I didn't touch it. I just stared at her. And for the first time, she stopped smiling. Her voice turned cold. "Rose, you can't take care of this place. It's time to move on." Daniel shifted uncomfortably, but didn't say a word. That was the first time I realized something had changed. Not just in Megan, but in my own son. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look me in the eyes. That night, I sat by the fireplace, holding my husband's old photograph, and I whispered, "Henry, what would you do if you were here?" Outside, the wind howled through the willows, and for a moment, I could almost hear his voice saying, "Hold on, Rose. Don't sign anything." The next morning, I found Megan in my husband's old study, going through his drawers. She jumped when she saw me. "Oh, I was just cleaning up." But she wasn't cleaning. She was searching for something. I didn't say a word. I just watched her walk out, pretending nothing happened. And that's when I knew she wasn't going to wait for me to agree. She was planning to take the farm, one way or another. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the house grew thicker. Daniel started coming around less, and when he did, he was always in a hurry. Megan, on the other hand, came every other day, always with some new reason. Checking the barn, checking the fence, checking the mail. But really, she was checking me. She'd walk into my kitchen, open the fridge, and sigh loudly. "Mom, you really shouldn't live like this. It's not healthy. What if you fell and no one was here?" Every word sounded sweet, but I could hear the greed hiding underneath. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about the title deed. One afternoon, a man in a suit came by. Megan introduced him as a financial consultant. He smiled too wide and spoke too fast. He said, "Mrs. Dawson, your son and his wife want to make sure you're comfortable. They're setting up a trust in your name. All we need is your signature here." I looked at the papers and said softly, "I'll have my lawyer look at it first." Megan's face dropped. Her voice turned sharp. "Rose, you don't need a lawyer. Daniel already checked everything." I smiled back, calm but firm. My husband always told me, "Never sign anything you didn't read." She glared at me then, just for a moment. But that moment said everything. The next week, I fell ill. The doctor said it was exhaustion, maybe a bit of stress. Daniel came to visit me in the hospital, and I remember the way he held my hand. "Mom," he said, "please don't worry about the farm. Megan and I will handle everything while you rest." At the time, I believed him. I wanted to believe my own son still cared. But deep down, I felt something wasn't right. 3 days later, I got a call from my neighbor, Clara. She said, "Rose, there's a for sale sign in front of your gate. Are you moving?" My heart stopped. I asked her to send me a photo, and when I saw it, my blood ran cold. My son's truck was parked right beside that sign, and Megan was talking to a man in a suit, the same consultant who'd come before. I called Daniel right away. He didn't answer. Then Megan picked up, sounding cheerful. "Oh, Rose, don't worry. It's just a preliminary listing. The buyers want to see the property." I said quietly, "You're selling my home while I'm in a hospital bed?" And she laughed. "Technically, it's Daniel's now. He's handling the paperwork." I couldn't breathe. The nurse had to steady me. My world, the one I built with my husband, was slipping away because of my own child. I stayed in that hospital bed for another 2 days, too weak to argue, too stunned to cry. But then something happened that changed everything. A man came to visit me. He was in his late 50s, wearing a gray suit and a kind smile. "Mrs. Dawson," he said softly, "I'm Mr. Harris. I was your husband's attorney." I frowned. "Henry's attorney? I thought all the paperwork was done when he passed away." He shook his head. "There was one more document your husband asked me to deliver, but only if anyone tried to sell the farm." My hands trembled as he opened a leather folder and handed me a sealed envelope. It had my husband's handwriting on it. "To my dear Rose, for when the time comes." I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter and another envelope labeled "The Will. Do not open until necessary." The letter read, "My Rose, if you're reading this, someone has tried to take what we built together. Don't be afraid. You still have the power to protect our home. I've made arrangements with my lawyer to ensure the truth is revealed when it needs most. Trust in what we planted together, not just in the soil, but in people. Henry. My tears fell on the paper as I read his name. I turned to Mr. Harris and whispered, "What does he mean by arrangements?" He smiled gently. "Mrs. Dawson, your husband left a second will, one that was never filed publicly. It protects you from any forced sale or transfer of ownership." For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. The farm wasn't gone yet. Henry had thought ahead. When I got out of the hospital, the air on the farm felt different. The wind didn't sound like it used to. Even the old oak tree by the fence seemed to watch me quietly, like it knew what had happened while I was gone. I walked up to the porch and saw the "for sale" sign lying face down in the dirt. Someone had kicked it over. Maybe the wind did, or maybe Henry did. Inside, the house smelled like fresh paint and perfume. Megan had been here. There were boxes stacked by the living room wall, labeled donate and trash. Some of them had my name written on them. I sat in Henry's old chair and closed my eyes. For a moment, I felt him there, his voice, calm and strong, telling me to breathe, to stay patient, to trust him. That night, I called Mr. Harris, my husband's lawyer. He came first thing in the morning with a brown envelope under his arm. He said, "Mrs. Dawson, this is the second will. It supersedes everything Daniel filed." I asked, "So what does it mean?" He smiled gently. "It means your husband left the farm entirely in your name and protected it from any sale, even by your son." I sat back stunned. Henry had known. He'd seen this coming. But before I could even finish reading, the door slammed open. It was Daniel and Megan. They looked furious. Daniel shouted, "Mom, what's going on? Why is the lawyer here again?" Megan stepped forward, waving a paper. "Are you trying to cancel the sale? You can't. We already have buyers." Mr. Harris stood his ground. "Actually, you can't sell it. Mrs. Dawson doesn't need your permission. The property is hers, fully, legally, and irrevocably." Daniel's face turned pale. Megan blinked in shock, then whispered, "That's impossible. We saw the will. It said everything goes to Daniel." Mr. Harris nodded calmly. "That was the first will. This is the final one. It was kept sealed until now." Daniel's jaw clenched. He turned to me, eyes full of anger and maybe guilt. "Why would Dad do this, Mom? Don't you trust me? We were just trying to help." I looked at my son, my own flesh and blood, and for the first time, I didn't see the little boy who used to bring me flowers from the garden. I saw a man who'd let greed grow where love used to be. I said softly, "Your father trusted me because I never lied to him, because I never tried to sell what we built together." Megan snapped, "Oh, come on. It's just a farm, Rose. You could have moved somewhere nice, a city condo maybe. Don't be so sentimental." I stood up. For a moment, I didn't feel old anymore. I felt steady, like the earth beneath my boots. I said, "It's not just a farm. It's my life. It's where my husband's hands planted every seed. It's where my son took his first steps. And it's where I'll take my last breath." Silence filled the room. Daniel looked down, ashamed, but Megan's eyes stayed cold. Then Mr. Harris spoke again. "I think you both should leave now. Mrs. Dawson has legal protection from any interference." Megan scoffed. "This isn't over." And they walked out. I watched them drive away, and as the dust settled on the long country road, I finally let myself cry. Not just because they tried to take the farm, but because somewhere along the way, I'd lost my son. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, and the stars looked brighter than they had in months. I whispered into the quiet air, "Henry, you were right. You always knew how to protect me." The wind rustled through the wheat fields, and I swear it almost sounded like he was laughing softly. A few days passed after that confrontation. The house felt quiet again, but not the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, when everything looks calm, but you know the wind hasn't truly died down yet. I spent my mornings on the porch, watching the sun rise over the fields. The wheat swayed slowly, golden and alive. It reminded me of Henry's laughter, the way he'd say, "Rose, the land always forgives us. People might not, but the land does." I held on to those words. They were my strength. Then one morning, I heard a car pull into the driveway. It was Daniel's truck. For a moment, I didn't know whether to go inside or stay put, but I stayed. He stepped out slowly, looking tired, older somehow. His eyes didn't have that same arrogance anymore. He walked toward me, holding his hat in his hands. "Mom," he said quietly, "can I talk to you?" I nodded and motioned him to sit beside me. For a while, we just sat in silence. The birds sang above us, and the air was thick with unspoken things. Finally, he said, "I came to say I'm sorry. You were right. Megan, she was never in it for us. She just wanted the money. She took everything, Mom. The accounts, the savings, even the car. When I told her about the second will, she lost it. She said she wasn't going to waste her life on a man with nothing left. She's gone." I closed my eyes for a moment. I didn't feel joy or anger, just a deep, quiet sadness. He kept talking. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I was stupid. I let her convince me that selling the farm was for you, but I knew deep down it was for us, for the money." He looked up the fields, eyes glistening. "I forgot what this place means, what it meant to Dad." I took a deep breath. "Daniel," I said softly, "you didn't just forget. You let someone else decide what mattered to you. But your father, he always believed you'd find your way back." He turned to me confused. "What do you mean?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small folded letter. It was the second one Henry had left, hidden inside the same envelope. I had only found it the night before. It was addressed to Daniel. "To my son, if you're reading this, you've made a mistake. Maybe you thought the world would reward you for being clever, but it only respects those who are honest. The farm is not just land, it's our family's promise. When you learn that, you'll earn it back, not through inheritance, but through your heart. Dad." Daniel's hands shook as he read it. When he finished, he couldn't look at me. He whispered, "He knew I'd fail him." I placed my hand on his. "No, son, he knew you'd learn." For the first time in years, Daniel cried, not out of anger or guilt, but from the weight of everything he almost lost. We sat like that for a long time. The sun was high when he finally spoke again. "Mom, I want to make it right. Let me work the farm again. I'll rebuild the fence, fix the roof, whatever needs to be done." I smiled gently. "Then start tomorrow. But not for me, Daniel. For your father. For yourself." He nodded, wiping his eyes. Then he stood and looked out over the fields. "I think I finally understand why he loved this place so much." That night, I watched him out the window, fixing the old barn light that had been broken for months. And for the first time in a long time, the house felt alive again. The next morning, I walked down to the mailbox and found another letter from Mr. Harris. It was short. Mrs. Dawson, your husband's final amendment in the will specifies that upon your passing, the farm will transfer to Daniel, but only if he maintains it for 5 consecutive years without selling or leasing it. Henry wanted to ensure Daniel learned the value of care, not money. I smiled. Henry had done it again. Even from beyond the grave, he was teaching us both what mattered. When Daniel came in for breakfast, I told him. He just smiled softly and said, "Then I guess I better learn how to take care of things the right way." And for the first time since Henry passed, I felt peace. Not the quiet, lonely kind of peace, but the real kind. The kind that comes from forgiveness growing back like spring after a long winter. That summer felt different from any I'd ever known. The air was still warm, but it didn't sting like it used to. The fields were alive again, and so was the house. Every morning, Daniel would wake up before sunrise, just like his father used to. I'd hear his boots on the wooden steps, the sound of the barn door creaking open, and sometimes the faint hum of an old tune Henry used to whistle. It made me smile. For months, I hadn't thought I'd ever smile again. I spent most of my days tending to the garden. The soil was softer now, and the flowers bloomed in colors I'd almost forgotten. Lavender, golden marigold, and the deep red roses Henry loved most. Sometimes Daniel would join me, kneeling beside the garden bed, his hands covered in dirt, but his eyes brighter than before. He didn't talk much, and I didn't push him to. Healing doesn't need words. It needs time and quiet honesty. One day as we worked, he said, "Mom, do you ever get tired of being out here alone all these years?" I thought about it for a moment. "No," I said softly. "I was never really alone. Your father was always here, in the soil, in the wind, in every part of this farm. I just had to learn how to listen again." He nodded, and for the first time, I saw a little of Henry in him. The way he smiled, the patience in his eyes. Weeks passed, and the farm started to look like itself again. The fences were fixed, the roof patched, and the barn lights glowed warm every night. Neighbors began stopping by, some to buy fresh eggs, others just to say hello. They all said the same thing. It feels good to see this place alive again. Daniel seemed proud. He'd started selling produce at the local market just like Henry used to. And though he never said it out loud, I could tell he wanted to make his father proud. One evening, we sat on the porch watching the sunset. The sky looked like fire and honey mixed together, a sight that always reminded me of the day Henry proposed. I said quietly, "Do you remember when you were 10 and you got lost in the cornfield?" Daniel laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I remember you yelling so loud the whole county heard you." I smiled. "I thought I'd lost you that day. I ran until my legs gave out. But when I finally found you, you were sitting there eating corn like it was the best day of your life." He grinned, eyes glistening. "I remember you didn't scold me. You just hugged me. I remember thinking, Mom smells like sunshine and dirt." I laughed softly. That laugh felt like music in the quiet air. As the days turned into weeks, I realized something. The farm wasn't just healing. We were. The nights were peaceful now. Daniel would sometimes read to me after dinner, letters from Dad, old farm notes, or sometimes just the weather forecast. It didn't matter what he read. It was the sound of his voice, calm, steady, real, that filled the house with warmth again. One afternoon, Mr. Harris came by to check in. He looked around and smiled. "Mrs. Dawson," he said, "I think Henry would be proud of both of you." I nodded. "I think he's already seen enough to know that." He chuckled. "I'll tell you something. When Henry wrote that clause in the will, the 5-year condition, he said to me, 'If my boy can care for the land that long, he'll never sell it again. He'll love it too much.'" I felt my chest tighten, but in a good way, like my heart had just taken a deep breath. When Mr. Harris left, I stood by the porch rail and watched Daniel in the field. He was working the soil, the evening light stretching his shadow long across the ground. For the first time, I saw him not as a boy who had made mistakes, but as a man, strong, humbled, and kind. And right there in that golden light, I whispered, "Thank you, Henry, for bringing him back to me." The crickets sang as the night crept in, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, peace that stayed.